My name is Paul Tilstone from Festive Road, and today I am in conversation with Michael Lyons from HSBC talking about the era of purposeful travel. Michael, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Well, thank you so much. It's good to be with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love the homage to business travel behind you. Is that a recent thing you've created to ensure you've kind of got the office feel, or?
Yeah, exactly. And by created, let's be clear. I wrote a check for this. There was my handyman skills are limited to that check writing, but the vision was certainly mine. And yeah, this is definitely the homage to the last 30 years of my life. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Having vision and not being hands-on is absolutely fine. But talking of vision, we're here to talk about the era of business travel. And I wondered if we could start with just some sort of landscape perspective. So either your personal opinions on how you're going to approach kind of business travel differently, your company's kind of position, and or how have workplace changes affected how you view business travel in the current landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. And thanks for the opportunity. You know, like so many of us, COVID has given us an opportunity to reevaluate what we're doing. You know, our industry is very often shaped by moments of crisis. You know, we can go back to 20 years ago to 9/11 and how that reframed everything. And COVID has certainly done that for the industry as a whole. And when I think about it at the perspective of my role and the role of my colleagues that manage travel for HSBC, this has given us an opportunity to look at where travel was sat in the organization and where it's going. We know travel is going to look a bit different as we come out of this. And during this period, our organization really looked at a lot of the services that were being provided across the company, including travel. We had been sat in our procurement organization, and through a look at where everything was and a restructuring, we were moved about 6-7 months ago into corporate services. And we were then put within corporate services, we went under the future of work and travel. So we are reporting to the head of future of work and travel. And that may sound a little bit awkward. At first you think, what? Future of work and travel. But when you think about what's happening right now, as so many companies are reevaluating what the workplace is going to look like, and as we know, travel is hand in glove with work. So what's travel going to look like as well? And what's that workspace going to be? So we're in a really exciting place now. So corporate services and future of work and travel. As we think about, returning to work, we know it's going to look different. It'll be a bit of a hybrid. Not everyone will be coming back into the office every day. And, when we're in the office, it'll be about collaboration. It's not going to be sitting in the office, taking Zoom calls and sending emails, but collaborating with colleagues, people across the firm that you're working with on various projects. And you think about travel and the future of it, what COVID has shown us that absolutely there's so much that we can do working remotely. And a lot of what we used to do, particularly around internal travel, may no longer be necessary. We may not just need to do it the way we were before. And so when we think about it now, it's thinking about not just the internal piece, but travel in whole. What's the intent? We always ask before to ask people, is this trip really necessary? In this post-COVID world, that intent to travel is really, really critical. Why am I making this trip? What's the return on that money that I'm spending? What's the impact on me as a person? As I'm traveling and returning, is there going to be a downstream knock-on effect on my family, my colleagues? And furthermore, what's the impact on the environment? What's that going to mean to the environment as I'm, running around the world doing X, Y, and Z? What's that all going to mean? So we're really thinking about with this focus on what's the intent, what's the purpose of this travel, why am I doing this?
So, first of all, we start at the beginning talking about your vision for your office, but that kind of vision of placing travel under the future of work stream within your business, I think, is incredibly insightful, because then you're managing the kind of the employee experience, whether it's within the four walls of an office building or whether it's outside those four walls, and you're looking for some consistency, which is really smart. And actually, I've heard of a couple of travel managers whose reporting lines have shifted in that direction, whether it's HR or whether it's, as you say, corporate services. So I think that's really awesome. You talk about travel with intent. Well, what sort of stage are you at in rethinking about travel with that lens, that intentional lens?
Yeah. So I'd say, we're out of the early stages of it to really thinking about now, this is really what we want to be doing, how, traveling with intent, being smart about it, traveling smarter. We're beginning to socialize that with our leadership and talking about, in terms of getting it out there in the short term, what are the tools that we want to communicate, particularly as we think about as we return to travel, being smarter about that, and then more long-term, how that evolves in terms of our supplier partners, how they can help us to do that, to be smarter about it as we look at this, traveling, again, I'm going to repeat this a bit, but, traveling with intent. So we're beyond that early stage, but we're in that, okay, now, what do we want to do in the short term and then the long term, socializing that and beginning to think about rolling it out.
And it sounds like, given that you've moved reporting line to future and work, that this is a very natural and easy process because it's a sort of philosophy from the top. Am I right? I'm hearing that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as we talk about, the future of work, returning to work, and how we can do that better, and it's all about adding value along the way, but in many ways, doing it digitally. We're thinking about, how we can, as you come back to work, what can you have in your hand that makes it easier to book a desk, to find a meeting room? And then from there, and this is more of a longer term goal, okay, I need to book a desk, I need to book this, I need to book my travel. And having that all, more of an all-in-one solution that allows us to do that. So it's really that adding value along the way, and adding that digital element to that process. But definitely it is coming from the top as we think about that.
Yeah, okay. And one of the things that you said there is, and I sort of reinterpret your words, because you talked about return to travel and then the long term. My sense is that there's probably a short-term change, a short-term behavior within corporations, and then there's a longer-term planning. And that short-term might see some initial kind of return to quite serious levels, but the long-term, especially if you're going down a travel with intent focus, actually may result in different types of travel. Do you agree with that? And if not, or if so, what do you see? How is this going to affect your travel types?
Yeah, so I would agree in general with what you're saying, because as we look at both short term and long term, there are things, in the short term, we know that there will be a return to travel. We suspect it's not going to necessarily be the floodgates initially, because just there is natural hesitation, even as we come out of COVID and we're vaccinated, but there is going to be a natural hesitation by people. We, again, going back to what I said earlier, we've learned that we've been able to do a lot, particularly as it relates to internal travel. We've learned that we can do a whole lot over technology and get it done and still be productive and perform well. But then as we start thinking longer term and just other things, we think about the impact on the person. From the very top of our firm, our group CEO is talking about the impact of travel on the person. Thinking that, the days of just continual international travel week after week after week, we have to look at that again. It's it impacts a person. There's, we know this, multiple time zones, mediocre food options, depending on where you are, and all of that, it impacts someone. And is that necessary? So we need to, there's a thought rethinking that travel. All right. So rather than lots of short little international trips, maybe we look at, all right, it's one long one. Let's knock this all out in a full 5-day turn, as opposed to a 2-day turn here, then the next week, a 3-day turn, but really being smarter about that. And then that ties into the bigger goal that we have as an organization as it relates to sustainability. We have a goal to be carbon net zero by 2030, 8.5 years away. Part of that goal is a 50% reduction in our travel emissions. So we've got to think about that as well in the longer term as we travel. So there are those short-term and then longer-term things that we're looking at now.
There's a couple of things I've picked up on. Is one, you got to sustainability, but you started with the impact on the person. And I think that's quite refreshing to hear that a corporate's really focused on that. Although I'm worried for you if you're concerned about the quality of food that you're eating. My problem's always been the food's too good and I have too much of it, and that's the problem. But the other thing you said was net carbon by the end of 2030, and for me, that's one of the big things that's going to shape this decade, because those targets are 2025, 2030, 2035, that starts shaping behavior right now. I think you talked about walking the walk, and actually as a company, you pitch a lot of sustainable investment products. So for you, that's really important, isn't it? That you kind of the travel program mirrors your external client-facing work?
Absolutely. I mean, one of our key strategies as a firm is that transition to net zero. And that is absolutely critical that we walk the talk, because we are very much in that sustainable financing space and doing things with our clients to help them, whether it's to obtain sustainable financing or whatever it is to help in that process to meet the goals that our clients have and that we have as a firm. So we've got to be smarter about that. So we've got to be looking, and in our role as travel managers is, getting more consultative with our businesses and helping them to understand, hey, if you want to lessen your carbon footprint, let's look at, different routings. There are different ways to get from A to B that are going to minimize that carbon footprint. Now, in some geographies, that may mean looking at rail as a better option. And we know rail can be challenging depending on the country, but in some countries, it's an excellent way to go. And so promoting more and more of that, working with our TMC partners on air and taking that more consultative approach around, the traditional routing for a London, Hong Kong may have been going, via, that more southerly route, when in fact, going, via Helsinki as an example, you're doing a lot more favors to the environment. So it's getting our TMC on board with that, and eventually getting the tools that we use so that a traveler can see in their hand, whether it's on their mobile or in a desktop experience, that, hey, if I go the southern way, that carbon impact is X. If I go the northern way, it's Y. Or in other cases, if I go rail, I do this. So it's looking at that, because again, going back to what you said, we absolutely have to walk the talk. I think there's another challenge to this. A lot of companies have really aggressive goals like we do by 2030. Our industry, you don't redesign an airplane overnight to be, that's going to become massively fuel efficient. And so many of our partners are looking at 2050 goals. And we know that there is a gap there. We appreciate what's happening with like sustainable aviation fuels and things like that. So that's a bit of we've got to be mindful of, there are things that we can do, and then there's only so much our partners can do. But again, working in partnership with them to help them get as far as they can, given the constraints.
Yeah, there's an interesting loop back here, which is I was just on a sustainability webinar yesterday, and we were talking about how things are beginning to change. And one of the things is the financial investment in companies is quite often being based on their approach to sustainability. And so that hopefully will shorten that kind of longer development cycle that you're talking about and that gap.
Yeah.
The other thing you pointed out is when you've got those variants in routing to different parts of the world, the importance of getting the right data at point of sale to allow you to make those decisions. I still feel like there's a gap there that definitely needs working on.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. We've got to close that gap quickly.
Yeah.
And then not only on the airspace, but there's a even more gaping maw around hotel. I think we forget a little bit about the lodging piece when we think about, you think of hotel as a hotel, but actually when we start thinking about, well, if you're this hotel that offers every amenity on the planet, fabulous pools, great bars, great restaurants, all of these, they are going to have a significant carbon footprint. Whereas if I stay at a hotel that, again, has a good selection of amenities that allows me to maintain my well-being, to get work done whilst I'm on the road, but because they don't have the huge infinity pool, they have 2 bars versus 4, 1 restaurant versus 6. It's much lower, but there's no standard. There's no effective way of measuring that. And that's another piece that we really need to close that gap. And that needs to be at point of sale. A traveler needs to be able to say, I can pick X and it's whatever it's to be, but Y, I still get a lot of the things I need and it's no impact on me, but it's a lesser impact on the environment.
You've
Big
talked
gap
about,
there.
yeah, and you've talked about travel with intent, which I love that phrase. And it's interesting, every company we speak to has a different phrase that fits their kind of cultural psyche. How does that change how I've got a personal beef with the internal, external travel definitions. So how does that change how you view internal travel? That's my first question. The second question is, does having a travel with intent focus mean that it's not only about whether the trip is necessary, but also the type of product that, to your point, type of product you're going to book on the trip, and whether you need the pool and the gym and everything else, or whether you just need somewhere to sleep? So those two questions.
Yeah. So I think, the first really kind of goes back to thinking about what's the purpose? Why am I making this trip? And whether it's internal or external, but when we think about internal, why am I doing this? What's the outcome going to be, particularly for our shareholders? We have an obligation to our shareholders. So we need to think very much about, why am I making this trip? Why am I doing this? What's the outcome going to be for the shareholder? And if I can if the outcome is the same by doing it over the technology that has proven so successful over the course of the last 15 months, and I'm going to save however many hundreds of dollars that it is, I'm going to save that wear and tear on me personally, and side benefit, there's lesser impact on the environment, then all the better. But I think it comes down to asking, what does this mean for the shareholder? What's going to be the benefit for them? And I think that really frames a lot of what we do going forward. Externally, the same. What's the benefit here? Much of our external travel is about the client facing, and what we need to do there. And so, what's the value of this trip? If it means we're going to be able to sign that deal, sustainable financing deal, for example, and that has all sorts of knock-on benefits for the client, for the environment, absolutely. It makes good sense to make that trip. But then, how do I do that? Can I be smarter about it? Can I take that different routing, or do I really just look? I'm flying in, client meeting, and I'm out the next morning. Boy, do I need all the bells and whistles? I don't. So it's getting that into people's minds, just thinking, all right, what's the outcome here? What am I trying to achieve? And by doing by doing it either this way, technology, or by going and how do I stay and how do I do it is all factoring into it.
So it sounds like you're saying that the travel with intent should and could ultimately result in a different mix of products and services that you're buying in the travel space, because people are being more determined about what they actually need and what they don't need in order to fulfill the role of whatever reason they're traveling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that's the end result.
Yeah. So where does this all go to? How does this ultimately, kind of playing on that different mix of products, where does this end up, either in your role or changes to your travel program or how your suppliers need to think? Where do you envisage this going to?
Yeah. So I think, what we're seeing for the role of the travel manager is, very often we have always, we've been very much kind of the quiet people behind the scenes that get it done. I think for many of us, our objective is we don't want our travelers or our C-suite, wherever it's to be worried about travel, and we've worked really hard to ensure that the services are provided. It's a well-oiled machine. The last thing you want is someone escalating a complaint over something that's happened in the travel booking process, for example. So we've worked really hard to ensure that's not it. So we've been incredibly operationally focused. It's been evolving to become more consultative, but as I had referenced earlier, we have these occasional seismic shifts in travel. When we go back to 9/11, suddenly overnight traveler tracking, it changed everything. And I think what COVID is doing, particularly for the travel management community, is bringing us forward into a much more consultative role in our firms, in our businesses, to be consulting with beyond. Very often, we would work with finance, procurement, security, but really this is expanding, and engaging with the businesses, but engaging now going forward in a very different way. Again, being able to tap into them as they have, let's face it, in a world where you maybe reduce budgets, how do we travel more effectively with the money that we have? How do we travel so that we're not impacting the environment? Who knows? There may be a day where you have a carbon budget. That could be something that's coming. So helping our businesses manage that carbon budget. So how do we do that more effectively? And that's where our partners come into play very much. And I think about the TMC in particular. So much there can be done through technology, their app or their ability to tap into a created app. But this is where that travel consultant, which we've called them for years, has really got to become a consultant, to be able to offer those, again, whether it's routing options for a smarter impact on the environment, hotel options, again, smarter around understanding, okay, this is why you're traveling. Well, in this case, this hotel, if they're asking, this hotel may work better. But being much more consultative and solution oriented. We've said for years, kind of that order taker mentality has been done and dusted for a long time. We've all talked to it. I think now we've crossed that threshold. As businesses, whether it's mine or any of us, start coming back, our travel consultants have to be ready for those questions. Okay, well, if I get stuck in this country because their COVID protocols change, what am I going to do? Or, okay, I'm booking 2 weeks out, post-COVID protocols change a week out. If our agency isn't, or whoever agency it is, isn't communicating that, or, we're in a world of hurt. So it becoming, it's almost like anything's going to be high touch now. When you ring in for those, whatever your adoption rate is, so for those 10% of calls that get where you're ringing in, it's all high touch now, or it's going to have to be. So there's an evolution there for sure.
Yeah, there's some challenges but opportunities for the TMCs in that space, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The other thing, has it expanded your horizon on like how involved you can get in different parts of the business? You mentioned booking a hot tub space.
Yeah, as sitting where we are now in corporate services and in this future of workspace environment, it really does start thinking about, how we can support that. And I really think, there's an exciting opportunity around a complete end-to-end solution, where you've got this ability to tap into the workplace app that allows you to, book a desk, book a meeting room, to know what's happening in whatever building it is, and then to say you've got your ability to book travel right into. And now that's, again, we're talking pie in the sky right now, but that's, the vision to be able to be in that all the way. And then you've got your hotel program in there, and knowing, okay, well, I know in this building I can book my desk, I can, and all of that. But where we've got the hotel program built in, that's also got other features like knowing what's in the neighborhood, and knowing, well, the office is here, here's the hotel, and in between, here's a couple restaurants, here's things like that. So the whole process, but to be able to have it all in one, and then thinking about where that goes from there, it's pretty exciting. It's still early days, but I think we're at a point where it's way beyond just book my travel. It's book my desk. It's book this. Help me to understand, okay, what's the COVID protocols here, or whatever the next, I hate to say it, but whatever the next pandemic is, because certainly something's coming.
Yeah,
so,
I think you're right. It is absolutely terrible to think that might be the case, but the reality is, you started off talking about how crises help to shape our sector. There will be other crises. It might not be a pandemic. It might be something else. But I think we kind of started off with vision. I love that we sort of ended with vision, and how this has given you a much wider perspective. And I want to thank you for joining us. What I heard, the travel with intent, I love the way that's defined, how much focused you are on shareholder value, and in some ways keeping that shareholder value top of mind every time you make a decision around travel, I think is a really powerful tool. I love that you're walking the talk internally, so to represent how you behave externally in the products and services you sell, and that this reporting to Future of Work has given you a much wider perspective. So thank you so much for joining us today and talking us through how you're getting on internally at HSBC.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for the work that you and Festive Road are doing. It's been incredibly helpful throughout this whole process with the tools that you put forward. It's been great. So many thanks, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Marvelous. Thank you, Michael. So thank you for watching another In Conversation with series with Michael Lyons from HSBC. Don't forget, you can download the Purposeful Travel Model at festive-road.com, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure you get future updated recordings. We've got lots of interviews on the way, so please don't miss them, and have yourself an amazingly purposeful year. Thanks for joining.